722, Big 550 KTRS. Yesterday on the show, we discussed Anthony Gray, who was the attorney for Michael Brown, and we certainly don't like to talk about people behind their back. Well, we do normally like to talk about people behind their back, but not when it comes to things like this. Anthony Gray, attorney for Michael Brown's family. Welcome back to Big 550 KTRS.
How you doing, McGraw? Good morning to you, sir.
You got it. Thank you for joining us.
No problem.
So one of the offshoots, one of the conversations that has happened since the Michael Brown shooting, and the protesters have talked about this. They talked about this with meeting with Mayor Francis Slay, and is the issue of how African Americans are targeted by police officers. They are taken advantage of. They're walking while black, driving while black, and I think the majority of St. Louisans actually agree that that's a problem and looking for ways to try and fix that problem. Sure. One of the biggest offenders, or one of the issues, is these communities up in North County that write large numbers of tickets, like Pine Lawn. They have a population of 3,200 people, and last year they wrote 17,000 tickets. And then I found out that you are the prosecutor for Pine Lawn as well as the police chief for Pine Lawn?
Right. I wanted to straighten that out. I'm no longer the prosecutor. My position with Pine Lawn started about 9 years ago. I initially came on board as the provisional judge. Then there was a need for a prosecutor. I filled that role. About 5 months ago, I transitioned from that to the role of the director of public safety. So I don't hold both positions, so I did want to clear that up.
Gotcha. Well,
and the reason why I hold the current role is because of the very thing that you've been discussing. I was brought in before body cameras and dash cams became fashionable and trendy. We were discussing implementing that in the city of Pine Lawn after discussion with the Justice Department, Rita and Adolphus Pruitt. I had relationships with them, and so the city thought that I would be the perfect person to help try to implement a lot of changes to shift the very things that you've been discussing.
How long have
How
long were you the prosecutor for Pine Lawn?
For about 7.5 years.
7.5 years, and so only recently you've been the director of public safety, which is more or less like a police chief.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
And you've
it's
never
a part-time position. I'm the chief executive officer of the department, there for mainly administrative purposes. The operations are kind of left up to the commanders of the department, and I just kind of oversee the administrative aspects and making sure that some of the things that you discuss are basically handled in a way consistent with our discussions with the judge.
But if you were the prosecutor in Pine Lawn for the last 7 years or so, the fact that they have 23,000 outstanding warrants, and last year they wrote 17,000 tickets, doesn't the prosecutor have some judgment in that and some responsibility for those tickets and those warrants being out there?
I have a responsibility to make sure that they are fairly adjudicated through our court system. I think I've done that job in 7.5 years remarkably. So much so that they thought it would be better if I got a little bit closer to that operation so that I can then kind of assist there. I can't do anything but prosecute what's put on the table. I have no control of how many tickets come into the court system as a prosecutor. Much no different than St. Louis County Prosecutor's Office have no control of how many robberies, burglaries, or anything else come to their office. So I can't control that from a prosecutor's standpoint. I can only make sure that people are treated justly and fairly by me as a prosecutor as they are adjudicated through our system.
So you would say 17, now that you're the police chief, are you expecting to write as many as 17,000 tickets next year?
I don't think so, McGraw, and I'm going to tell you why. Basically, the reason why the enforcement had increased to the level that it had gotten, for a long time there was hardly any traffic enforcement. There were a lot of citizen complaints. We got 3 main arteries in Pine Lawn: Natural Bridge, Genesation Road, Highway 70. And because of the complaints that citizens, some of the same people that might be complaining now, the administration made a decision to beef up its traffic enforcement. And when it went to that effort, I would admit that perhaps there was some zealousness on the officers and there was some duplication in ticket writing that resulted in a multitude of tickets being written. I don't think that that's going to be the case going forward. And I would assure you this, that we are closely monitoring that to make sure that people are treated fairly. Now, these are people that are being stopped legitimately. They're speeding. And sometimes when they're stopped, every little nickel and dime thing that an officer would observe, they would write a ticket, and perhaps some of those things could have deserved a warning. And so we're trying to be a little bit more discretionary as we issue those violations.
How many police officers does Pine Lawn have?
Right now, actively, it's about 14, and then we're supported by a reserve force as well. That number fluctuates. I may be off by a few here or there.
How many black officers of those 14 are there?
McGraw, I don't have those stats right off the top of my head, but I know, let me see, just giving you a rough number, I can say I'm looking at 6, and I might be missing 1 or 2 here and there.
So 6, so almost half.
We're just about close to that.
Yeah. Do you have a hard time finding black officers the way some of these other departments talk about finding black officers?
Well, I would say no. I'm just now getting involved in that hiring process, and so I can't say there's a difficulty right now. But as time goes on and as openings start to come up, then I will be able to have a better assessment.
Yeah.
I think that whole notion that you can't find qualified black officers is a red herring. I don't believe in that. I think that a lot of departments look for perfect people, and when you have an African American population in St. Louis that's basically grown up in poverty in these certain areas, they're not going to come out of that thing, perfect.
Yeah.
So,
do you think, should you, as the police chief of Pine Lawn, should you live in Pine Lawn, and should the police officers live in Pine Lawn, like some of the other criticism of the Ferguson officers not living in Ferguson?
Well, that because the city is so small, McGraw, is kind of unrealistic. I mean, in a perfect world, perhaps that should be the case, but because the community is such a small community, then getting candidates to come and work there, it's not really realistic to expect them to live in that area. It would be ideal, and if there's a resident that would like to join the police department and wants to go through the academy, quite naturally they will get a kind of favorable look because of that.
Right.
But no, I don't think that a residency rule requirement would be necessary.
Do the Pine Lawn police officers have cameras on their cruisers, or body cameras, or badge cameras?
No, we did order, and like I said before, it became trendy.
Right.
Several months before the Ferguson incident, back I think it was back in April or so, or maybe May. We had ordered one camera, and then we decided to get 3 more. So we have a total of 4, all different brands. And what we wanted to do was test out each model to see which one worked better for Pine Lawn. Now, we haven't received the last 2, so we're waiting to get all of them to deploy them at the same time. So they're not currently wearing them, but we do have them on order.
How about Pine Lawn? As the new police chief, are you going to implement some type of civilian review board?
That was a part of our discussion with the Justice Department back last summer. That process is underway. I certainly support it. I supported it then. I support it now. Just getting the logistics of that and constituting the review board has just been a logistical challenge for right now.
Do you see Anthony Gray, the attorney for the family of Michael Brown, also the police chief for Pine Lawn? The official title is Director of Public Safety. Do you see that some people could possibly see a conflict of interest? I mean, it'd be like Judge or Officer Belmar, who was the police chief in the county, but also a lawyer for a family that has some issues with is dealing with the police and the prosecutor. I mean, is there any conflict of interest being being the family's lawyer and a police chief for Pine Lawn?
Okay, let me address that head on. First of all, let me answer your question. Yes, I can see people feeling that way and seeing it that way. However, I'm a part-time employee. My full-time practice is the practice of law. Several attorneys who serve in these municipalities, such as I do, have full-time practices that consist of civil litigation that's different from what they do with the municipality. I don't see a conflict because I have no connection with Ferguson. This has nothing to do with Ferguson, and I fight for justice. I don't care who they are. If they come to my office, I look at a case, whether you black, white, Russian, Asian, Ethiopian, it doesn't matter. If I believe that the principle that you want me to fight for is something that I can fight for, I will do that. It doesn't matter if you're government, private sector, any of those things. So I don't feel that there's a conflict because justice doesn't have a conflict. I fight for justice no matter who it affects.
Should the town of Pine Lawn exist?
Of course it should. Yeah. All these municipalities, you got to remember, they started off unincorporated. And for whatever reason, a group of citizens got together and decided they wanted to incorporate and create their own sovereign. And they've operated like that until today. Now, if they want to disincorporate, obviously they have that option. But can they and should they? Of course they can. I mean, that would say that St. Louis County or St. Louis City should disincorporate. So it depends on the circumstances, but no, I would not generally say that it should dissolve or disincorporate. I would not agree with that.
Anthony Gray, last question for you. Lots of talk about Bob McCullough, lots of talk about him and his conflict of interests and people seeing him having a conflict of interest, wanting him to step down. Would you like to see him step down, or do you think he could do like you do as a prosecutor and as a police chief and provide fair justice for all in this case?
Well, unlike me, he does have a direct conflict of interest, and I'm going to tell you why. I realized it the other day when Darren Wilson did not show up for court on the very case that he received the award for, that video showing him receiving that award. He did not show up for that case, and it hit me then. He can't show up because he's under this cloud of an indictment by this prosecutor's office. So if they put him out, if he's indicted, he could never show up for that case. In fact, he couldn't show up for any case that this prosecutor office is prosecuting. And if he's indicted, has the potential of opening up old cases. So this prosecutor's office, by appearance only, I'm not giving anybody this motivation, I'm saying by the appearance of it, have a motivation to make sure this guy's not indicted. Because if he's not indicted, he can then not only show up for that case, all the future cases, and they're not in jeopardy of opening up old cases. To me, that's a direct conflict of interest, at least on the surface. That's direct, not some tangential conflict they're trying to make with my affiliation with the multiple cities that I deal with.
Anthony Gray, I thank you for your time. I'm sure we'll be talking to you down the line. Thank you for your time, and be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thank you for allowing me to come on and explain. I appreciate you, McGraw. You have a great day.
You got it. Anthony Gray, the attorney for Michael Brown's family, also the police chief for Pine Lawn. Wrote 17,000 tickets last year. He said that those numbers might go down now that he is the police chief. He'd have to sort of look at that. We'll have that entire interview up online for you here in a second. 7:35. Big